Officer Ryan Matthews was eager to prove himself. He had been a police officer for only a year and wanted to show his superiors that he was good at his job. He always followed the rules and took his duty seriously, but sometimes he acted too quickly without thinking things through. That afternoon, he was patrolling a small park near a shopping area. The park was usually filled with families, but today it was quiet. As he drove past, his sharp eyes noticed a young girl sitting alone on a bench. She looked about 9 or 10 years old, wearing a light blue dress and holding a small bag. She seemed nervous, glancing around as if waiting for someone. Ryan slowed his car and parked nearby. Something about the situation made him uneasy. Why was a little girl sitting alone? Where were her parents? He had seen too many bad things happen to children who were left alone. He decided to check on her. As he walked toward her, the girl looked up. She had big, bright eyes and neatly tied blonde hair. She seemed surprised when she saw him. "Hey there, sweetie," Ryan said in a friendly voice. "Are you okay? Where are your parents?" The girl hesitated. "I'm just waiting for my dad. He's coming to pick me up." Ryan narrowed his eyes. "Do you have a phone? Can you call him?" She shook her head. "I don't have a phone, but my dad is coming soon." Ryan wasn't convinced. He had dealt with lost kids before, and many times they were afraid to tell the truth. He thought she might be a runaway, or maybe even kidnapped. He needed to make sure she was safe. "Okay, what's your dad's name?" Ryan asked. The girl hesitated again. "David," she said simply. Ryan frowned. "David what?" Before she could answer, a woman passed by and glanced at them. The woman gave a concerned look but didn't stop. Ryan felt like people were watching, but he didn't care. He needed to do his job. "I think I should take you to the station," Ryan finally said, "just until we find your dad." The girl's eyes widened in shock. "No, my dad is coming. I'm not lost." Ryan thought she was just scared, which was normal. He crouched down to her level and smiled. "It's okay. I'm a police officer. You'll be safe with me." She shook her head, looking frustrated. "I don't need to go anywhere." But Ryan had made up his mind. He gently took her by the hand and led her toward his police car. The girl didn't scream or fight, but she looked very unhappy. As Ryan drove her toward the station, he felt proud of himself. He had likely just saved a lost or runaway child. What he didn't know was that this was the biggest mistake of his life, and in just a few minutes, he would regret everything. Ryan Matthews continued to drive toward the police station, feeling confident that he was doing the right thing. The young girl sat quietly in the back of the squad car, her small figure hunched up against the seat. She had stopped protesting, but Ryan could tell she was upset. He glanced in the rearview mirror and saw her wiping her eyes. "Don't worry," Ryan said, trying to sound reassuring. "We'll find your dad soon. Everything will be okay." The girl didn't reply. She just stared out of the window, her fingers tightly clutching the edge of her seat. Ryan turned his attention back to the road, thinking about what he would say to his supervisor when he got to the station. He hoped he wouldn't get into trouble for taking the girl in. After all, he was just trying to keep her safe. When they arrived at the police station, Ryan parked the squad car and got out. He walked around to the back door and opened it, gently helping the girl out of the car. She didn't move much. It was as if she had given up on trying to explain herself. Ryan's stomach twisted, but he pushed the feeling aside. He was doing his job. He led her inside the station, where the officers behind the front desk gave him curious looks. Ryan didn't mind. He was used to attention. He walked up to the desk and explained to the officer there that he had found the girl alone in the park. "I think she might be lost," Ryan said. "I'm going to need to take a statement and maybe call her parents." The officer nodded, but there was something about the way he was looking at Ryan that felt off. Ryan didn't notice, though. He was too focused on the task at hand. He took the girl to a small room in the back of the station, where they usually interviewed witnesses and suspects. The girl sat down on the chair, looking even smaller in the large room. Ryan told her to stay put while he filled out the necessary paperwork. As he filled out the forms, he tried to strike up a conversation with her. "What's your name, sweetie?" "Emily," she answered quietly, her voice barely a whisper. "Emily, that's a nice name," Ryan said with a smile. "Where's your dad? Does he live nearby?" Emily didn't answer at first. She just stared at the floor, her fingers twisting the hem of her dress nervously. Ryan was about to ask her again when the phone on the desk suddenly rang. Ryan picked up the receiver, distracted for a moment. It was dispatch, but as he listened to the voice on the other end, his stomach dropped. "Ryan, we've got a call coming in about a missing girl. Is everything okay there?" Ryan's mind raced. Missing girl? Wasn't Emily just waiting for her dad? Something wasn't right. He didn't know it yet, but the storm was just beginning. Back at the station, Emily sat quietly in the small room, staring at her shoes. Ryan Matthews was still distracted by the phone call from dispatch, which was becoming more troubling by the second. His thoughts raced, but he tried to stay calm. He didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. On the other end of the line, the dispatcher was speaking quickly. "Ryan, we've just received a call from Chief Carter. He's reporting a missing child, his daughter. She's a 9-year-old girl named Emily Carter. Are you sure that's the same girl you have in custody?" Ryan froze. His heart skipped a beat as the words sank in. Emily Carter. The name sounded so familiar. Suddenly, the pieces clicked together. Emily was the daughter of Chief David Carter, the head of the entire police department. He had seen the chief around, respected him even. And now, here he was, sitting in the same station, with his daughter in custody. Ryan felt a wave of panic wash over him. How could he have made such a huge mistake? He quickly covered the receiver with his hand, glancing at Emily through the glass. She was still sitting there, quiet and alone, completely unaware of the unfolding situation. "Wait," Ryan said, his voice shaking. "You said Chief Carter is looking for his daughter." "That's right," the dispatcher confirmed. "We need to know where she is right now." Without another word, Ryan hung up the phone and rushed back to the room where Emily was sitting. His mind raced as he opened the door and stepped inside. The girl looked up at him, and for a second, their eyes met. Emily looked a little scared, but there was still a trace of trust in her eyes. She had been calm and patient so far, but Ryan knew he had just made a huge mistake. "Emily," Ryan said gently, his voice softer than before. I need to apologize. I didn't know. Your dad, he's the chief, right?" Emily nodded, her expression still confused. "Yes, my dad is Chief Carter." Ryan's heart sank. He was supposed to be the one protecting people, but now he was the one who had made this girl feel afraid. His stomach twisted with guilt. "Listen, Emily," he continued, taking the seat next to her. "I'm going to make a call. I'm going to let your dad know where you are. Everything is going to be okay." But as Ryan reached for the phone, the door to the room suddenly burst open. Chief Carter walked in, his face hard with worry and anger. "Where is my daughter?" The words came out cold, but Ryan could feel the intensity of the chief's gaze. Ryan stood up quickly, his face flushed with embarrassment and regret. "Chief Carter, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. I thought Emily was lost or in danger. I didn't know." But Chief Carter didn't let him finish. He looked past Ryan, his eyes locking onto Emily. She was standing up now, moving toward him. "Dad!" Emily exclaimed, rushing into her father's arms. Ryan stood there, frozen in place, watching as the reality of his mistake hit him like a ton of bricks. The room was silent except for the sound of Emily's sobs. She clung tightly to her father, her small frame shaking with relief. Chief David Carter wrapped his arms around her, his eyes softening for a brief moment as he held her close. Ryan stood frozen by the door, his heart racing. He had never felt so small in his life. "Dad, I told him I wasn't lost," Emily whispered, her voice muffled in her father's chest. I told him you were coming to get me. Chief Carter stroked his daughter's hair gently, nodding, but his face was still full of concern. His eyes shifted from Emily to Ryan, and the warmth in his gaze quickly turned to ice. Ryan felt a wave of guilt wash over him as he stood there, unsure of what to do. He had made a mistake. No, a huge mistake. And now he had to face the consequences. I didn't mean to cause any trouble, sir, Ryan stammered, his voice shaking. He tried to find the right words, but nothing seemed good enough. I saw her alone in the park and thought she might be lost. I didn't know she was your daughter. Chief Carter's jaw tightened. You didn't know. He repeated slowly, his voice dangerously calm. You didn't think to ask. You didn't even bother to call her father. You didn't even think to check who she was before you decided to detain her. Ryan opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. How could he explain that he had just acted out of instinct, that he was trying to help? He knew it didn't matter. He had overstepped. He had hurt this family. I'm sorry, Ryan managed finally. I should have checked. I was just trying to make sure she was okay. I never meant for this to happen. Chief Carter took a deep breath, his eyes not leaving Ryan. Do you realize what you've done? His voice was low and steady, but Ryan could hear the anger beneath the calm. You've arrested my daughter without cause. You've made her afraid of the people who are supposed to protect her. You've done something unforgivable, officer. Ryan's face turned bright red. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He had never imagined things could go so wrong. He was supposed to be the one making things right, not causing more problems. I'll take full responsibility, sir, Ryan said, his voice barely above a whisper. Please, I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. I never meant to hurt her. Chief Carter shook his head. I don't care about what you meant. I care about the fact that you broke the trust my daughter should have had in the police. I care about the fact that you didn't do your job properly. There was a long silence as Chief Carter held Emily close, his hand gently rubbing her back. Ryan felt a lump in his throat. He had never felt so ashamed of himself. Finally, Chief Carter spoke again, his voice hard. You're going to have to explain this to my superiors. I don't know if your career will survive this, but you're going to face the consequences. Ryan nodded, not knowing how to respond. What could he say? There was nothing he could say to undo what he had done. As Emily looked up at her father, she whispered, I knew you'd come, Dad. And that was all Chief Carter needed to hear. Ryan Matthews felt like his world had just crumbled. He had made a mistake, a big one. He watched as Chief Carter held his daughter tightly, making sure she was okay. Emily had stopped crying, but Ryan could see the worry still on her face. How could he have let this happen? He had been so sure that he was doing the right thing, but now he realized how wrong he was. Chief Carter, still holding Emily, turned his icy gaze back to Ryan. The air in the room felt heavy, and Ryan could feel his heartbeat pounding in his chest. His mouth was dry, and he had no idea how to fix the situation. What could he say to make this right? I never meant for this to happen, Ryan said, his voice almost shaking. Please, sir, I made a mistake. I didn't know she was your daughter. I thought she was lost or in danger. I just wanted to keep her safe. But Chief Carter didn't soften. His expression was cold and stern, and Ryan could tell that no words would make things better. Your job is to protect people, Ryan, Chief Carter said, his voice low and controlled. And you failed. You failed my daughter. She trusted you. I trusted you. Ryan swallowed hard, the guilt eating away at him. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have checked before I did anything. I didn't think. Chief Carter's eyes locked onto his. Exactly. You didn't think. You acted on impulse, and now you've made my daughter afraid of the very people who are supposed to protect her. The words were like a punch to the stomach. Ryan had never wanted to hurt anyone, especially not a child. He had wanted to help, but now he realized how foolish and careless he had been. I know I can't fix this, but I'll do whatever it takes to make it right," Ryan said, his voice desperate. "I'll speak to your superiors. I'll take responsibility for everything. Just please don't think I'm a bad officer. I made a mistake, but I never meant for this to happen." Chief Carter took a deep breath and looked at his daughter, who was now sitting quietly on the bench beside him. She glanced up at her father, her small face full of concern. Ryan could see that she was still shaken by the whole ordeal, and it broke his heart. "Emily," Chief Carter said softly, "are you okay?" Emily nodded, but she didn't say anything. Her eyes were fixed on the floor, clearly still upset by the situation. Chief Carter turned his attention back to Ryan. "This isn't something that can be easily fixed, Ryan. My daughter trusted you, and you broke that trust. You have to understand how serious this is." Ryan nodded, his head hanging low. He couldn't imagine how angry Chief Carter was. The guilt weighed heavily on him, and he knew there was no easy way out of this. "I'll do anything," Ryan repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "Please, just give me a chance to make it right." Chief Carter didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a moment, looking down at his daughter and then back at Ryan. Finally, he spoke, his voice firm. "We'll see, Ryan. We'll see if you can fix this. But for now, you need to understand that your actions have consequences, and you'll have to face them." Ryan swallowed hard. He knew the road ahead was going to be difficult, but he was willing to do whatever it took to make up for his mistake. The weight of the situation hung over him like a dark cloud. The next few days were a blur for Ryan Matthews. He couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. He had spent his entire career up until that point working hard to make a name for himself. But now, all of that seemed pointless. One mistake had completely turned his life upside down. Ryan had been called into the police chief's office for a meeting with his superiors. As he sat in the waiting room, his heart raced. He couldn't help but replay the events of the past few days over and over in his mind. He had arrested a child, Chief Carter's daughter, without reason. And now he had to face the consequences. The door to the office opened, and Ryan stood up, his legs feeling like they were made of stone. Chief Carter was sitting at the head of the table, his expression still cold. A few other officers were seated around him, all of them silent. Ryan walked into the room and stood at attention, waiting for the storm to hit. "Ryan," Chief Carter said, his voice calm but firm, "take a seat." Ryan nodded and slowly sat down, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on him. "We've reviewed the incident," Chief Carter continued, "and the fact remains, you detained a child without cause. That's unacceptable." Ryan opened his mouth to speak, but Chief Carter held up a hand to stop him. "You acted without thinking. You didn't follow protocol, and you didn't take the time to verify who she was. You put her in a situation that terrified her. And for what? To try to look like a hero." Ryan felt his face flush. "No, sir. I didn't do it for that. I thought I was helping. I thought she was in danger." "Help," Chief Carter repeated, his voice growing colder. "You've made a mistake, Ryan. A big one. But now it's time to face the reality of what that mistake means." Ryan swallowed hard, feeling a knot form in his stomach. He could feel the eyes of the other officers on him, and he knew they were all thinking the same thing, that he had messed up. Big time. "Chief," one of the officers spoke up, "what are we going to do about this? He made a serious error in judgment." Chief Carter's eyes shifted to the officer, and then back to Ryan. "It's not just about an error in judgment. It's about trust. Ryan has broken that trust, not just with Emily, but with all of us. And it's going to take a long time to rebuild that." Ryan felt a wave of shame wash over him. The guilt he had been feeling only deepened now that he was hearing it all out loud. He had let down the people he respected, the ones he had worked with every day. And most of all, he had let down Emily, a little girl who had only been trying to get home safely. "What's going to happen to me, sir?" Ryan asked quietly. Chief Carter's gaze hardened. We've decided to put you on administrative leave for now. You'll undergo an internal review. After that, we'll determine whether or not you can remain on the force." Ryan's stomach dropped. He had never felt so unsure of himself. Everything he had worked for was now hanging in the balance. "I understand," Ryan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll accept whatever comes. I know I've made a huge mistake." Chief Carter gave a slight nod, his eyes softening just for a moment. "You're going to have to live with this, Ryan, and you'll have to work hard to prove that you can be trusted again." As Ryan left the room, he felt like a failure. He wasn't sure if he'd ever be able to rebuild his reputation. But one thing was certain: this mistake had changed him. It had opened his eyes to the importance of thinking before acting, of always considering the consequences. Ryan wasn't sure what the future held for him, but he knew he had a long road ahead if he ever hoped to make things right. The news of Ryan Matthews' mistake spread quickly throughout the police department. Within hours, the story was on the local news, and soon, people across the city were talking about it. The headlines screamed, "Police officer detains 9-year-old girl, mistakes her for a runaway." Ryan's face was everywhere. Some were sympathetic, but most were angry. The comments on social media were filled with outrage. People were questioning how an officer could make such a basic error, especially when it came to a child. Ryan couldn't escape it. Everywhere he went, he was reminded of his mistake. Every time he walked into the police station, he felt the eyes of his fellow officers on him. Some avoided him completely, while others whispered behind his back. He knew they all had their own thoughts about him now. He had become the topic of conversation in every corner of the department. The calls and emails from his family and friends didn't help either. His parents were worried, but they didn't know how to comfort him. His colleagues were telling him that he would get through this, but the truth was that Ryan wasn't sure he would. As the days went by, Ryan found himself spending more and more time alone. He stayed away from the station, trying to avoid the judgment and whispers. He wasn't ready to face his superiors again. He knew he would have to go back, but the thought of it made his stomach turn. Meanwhile, Chief Carter had made it clear that this wasn't something he could simply forget. Ryan had been placed on administrative leave pending an internal review, and the department was going through the necessary steps to determine whether or not Ryan would be able to return to work. The weight of the situation was suffocating. Ryan had heard rumors that some of his colleagues were calling for his dismissal. They didn't think he should be allowed to remain on the force. There were others who felt sympathy for him, but they were in the minority. The damage had been done. One afternoon, Ryan decided he couldn't keep hiding. He had to face the music. He took a deep breath and walked into the police station, his heart heavy with fear. The station was quieter than usual. Some officers nodded at him as he walked by, but most of them didn't look his way. Ryan made his way to the office where he had been called in before. When he entered, Chief Carter was sitting behind his desk, looking over some papers. He didn't look up when Ryan entered. For a moment, there was silence in the room. Ryan stood in front of the desk, unsure of what to say. Finally, Chief Carter looked up. His eyes were tired, but there was still that coldness in his expression. "Ryan, sit down," he said. Ryan sat down slowly, his hands trembling. "We've completed the review," Chief Carter began, "and we've decided that there will be consequences for your actions. However, we're giving you a chance to redeem yourself." Ryan's heart raced. He didn't know what was coming next. He was ready for the worst. But Chief Carter's next words surprised him. "We're not firing you," the chief said, "but you're going to have to work hard to rebuild the trust you've lost. And that's not going to be easy. You're going to have to prove yourself all over again." Ryan nodded, his throat dry. "I understand, sir. I'll do whatever it takes." Chief Carter stared at him for a long moment, then sighed. "This isn't going to be quick or easy, but if you're serious about making things right, we'll give you a chance to earn back your place here." Ryan felt a mix of relief and guilt. He had been given another shot, but he knew he had a long road ahead. He was grateful for the opportunity, but he couldn't forget the look in Emily's eyes when she first saw him in the police car. The damage had been done, and it was going to take everything he had to fix it. Weeks had passed since the incident, and the dust had settled, but Ryan Matthews couldn't shake the feeling of guilt that still weighed on him. He had been given a second chance to prove himself, but it felt like an uphill battle. Every day, he thought about the moment when he had first placed Emily in the back of his squad car. He could still hear her voice, soft and pleading, asking him to trust her. That memory haunted him. Ryan had spent the last few weeks working hard to rebuild his reputation, not just with his colleagues, but also with the people he had let down. He had been attending counseling sessions offered by the department, focused on improving his decision-making skills and learning how to properly assess situations before taking action. He worked tirelessly to remind himself that being a police officer wasn't just about enforcing laws. It was about understanding people and building trust with the community. At first, the other officers treated him with distance. Some still didn't know what to make of him. Ryan didn't blame them. He had made a mistake that was impossible to ignore. But gradually, as he showed up every day, worked harder, and kept his head down, things started to change. A few of his colleagues began offering support, giving him small words of encouragement. It was small, but it meant the world to him. Still, there was one person who wasn't ready to forgive him: Chief Carter. Ryan had been hoping for a conversation with Chief Carter for days, but the opportunity hadn't come. He knew it wasn't going to be easy to face the man whose trust he had broken. He couldn't imagine what it would be like to look the chief in the eyes and explain, again, why he had made the mistake he did. One afternoon, Chief Carter called Ryan into his office. Ryan's heart skipped a beat. This could be the moment that decided his future. He walked into the office, feeling the weight of every mistake he had made. Chief Carter was sitting at his desk, his hands folded neatly in front of him. He looked up at Ryan, his expression unreadable. Ryan stood at attention, waiting for the words that would decide his fate. "You've been working hard," Chief Carter began, his voice steady. "I've seen you show up every day, doing your best. I know it hasn't been easy, but that's not what matters. What matters is how you've handled your mistakes and how you've worked to make things right." Ryan nodded, unsure of what to say. "You're not the same officer who brought my daughter into the station all those weeks ago," Chief Carter continued. "You've learned from this. You've shown me that you can own up to your actions and change. I respect that." Ryan felt a lump form in his throat. He had worked so hard to earn back the trust he had lost, and now it seemed like it was paying off. Chief Carter took a deep breath. "I've made my decision. You'll be back on active duty, but with some restrictions. You'll be under probation for the next 6 months. During that time, you'll have regular check-ins with me, and you'll have to continue with the counseling sessions. But if you prove yourself, you'll be a full officer again." Ryan's heart lifted. He couldn't believe it. After everything, he was being given a second chance. "Thank you, Chief," Ryan said, his voice thick with emotion. Chief Carter nodded. "You've earned this, Ryan, but don't forget, every day is a chance to prove that you're the officer we need. Don't make the same mistake again." Ryan left the office that day with a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that the road ahead was still long, but now he had the opportunity to rebuild his career and prove that he could be the officer he had always wanted to be. The journey wasn't over, but it had just begun. Ryan Matthews walked out of the chief's office with a mix of emotions swirling inside him: relief, gratitude, and a deep sense of responsibility. He had been given a second chance, but he knew it wasn't going to be easy. The next few months would determine whether he could rebuild the trust he had lost, not just with Chief Carter, but with the entire department, and with himself. The weight of the decision hung over him, but for the first time in weeks, he felt a spark of hope. The probation period meant that he had to prove himself daily, but it also meant that he had time to grow and learn from his mistakes. He wasn't being written off completely, and that gave him the chance he needed. Over the next few days, Ryan threw himself into his work like never before. He worked longer hours, asking for additional patrols, and taking on extra responsibilities whenever he could. Every action, no matter how small, became an opportunity to show that he was learning and changing. He had to earn back the respect of his colleagues, but it wasn't just about showing them he could do his job. It was about showing them that he was someone they could trust again. One afternoon, as Ryan was finishing up a report at his desk, one of his colleagues, Officer Lewis, walked by and stopped in front of him. "Hey, Matthews," Lewis said, looking him in the eye. "I just wanted to say, you've been doing good work lately. Keep it up." Ryan looked up, surprised. Lewis wasn't the type to offer praise easily. A small smile tugged at his lips. "Thanks, Lewis. That means a lot." It wasn't much, but it was a start. Little by little, Ryan was earning the respect of those around him. It wasn't the same as it had been before the incident, but it was something. And that something was enough for him to keep going. A few weeks later, Ryan was on patrol when he spotted a young girl sitting alone on a park bench, looking nervous. His heart skipped a beat. The situation felt eerily familiar, but this time, he didn't jump to conclusions. He approached the girl slowly, just as he had done many times before with others. "Hey there," he said gently. "Are you all right? Are you waiting for someone?" The girl looked up at him, her eyes wide. "I'm waiting for my mom. She's just a minute away." Ryan nodded, his hand resting on his hip. "All right, just making sure you're okay. Stay safe." The girl smiled, nodding back. Ryan watched her for a moment before walking away, this time with no fear or uncertainty. He had learned from his past mistakes. He wasn't the same officer who had made that rash decision weeks ago. As Ryan continued his patrol, he felt a sense of pride. He hadn't been perfect, and he knew he never would be. But he was doing his best, and that was all he could ask of himself. When he returned to the station that afternoon, Chief Carter was there, walking past Ryan with a quick nod. "Good work out there today," Chief Carter said, his voice calm but sincere. Ryan looked at him, grateful for the simple acknowledgement. "Thanks, sir. I'm trying." Chief Carter didn't say anything more, but the small nod of approval was enough. It was a sign that, slowly but surely, Ryan was on the right path. As he left the station that evening, Ryan couldn't help but feel that this was only the beginning. There would always be more challenges ahead, but now he was ready. He had learned the hardest lesson of all. That trust had to be earned, one day at a time, and this time he was willing to do whatever it took to make sure he never made the same mistake again.